Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story. Chloe was rushing desperately through the hotel hallways, holding up the hem of her dress and trying not to break her ankle in heels. That, until now, had seemed like a great choice, but now felt like a death sentence. The plan was simple: arrive early, help with the preparations, and shine as a bridesmaid. But of course, the universe decided today was the perfect day to test her patience. First, the taxi was late. Then, a reckless driver nearly ran her over at the hotel entrance. And to top it all off, the elevator that would take her straight to the ballroom was packed, forcing her to sprint up the stairs. If there were an award for the clumsiest bridesmaid in history, she would definitely win. Sorry, she mumbled, with every bump into bewildered guests. She was just a few steps away. Chloe could already hear the murmur of the guests inside the ballroom, which meant the ceremony was about to start. And then it happened. Bam! Chloe crashed into something solid, or rather, someone. The impact was so strong that her bouquet went flying. Her purse hit the floor, and she nearly kissed the hotel's expensive carpet. But before she could complete her disaster, strong hands grabbed her by the waist, preventing a full-blown catastrophe. The scent of an expensive cologne filled her senses, and for a second, she forgot even her own name. "Please tell me I didn't just run over an elderly man," she muttered, trying to regain her balance. "I'm definitely not an elderly man." The deep, slow voice made her blink a few times before finally looking up at the man holding her waist. Chloe nearly choked. What kind of genetic injustice was this? The man in front of her looked like he had stepped straight out of a luxury suit advertisement. Dark hair perfectly styled, piercing blue eyes, and the aura of someone who was used to being in charge. His expression was a mix of curiosity and amusement. "You're late." Chloe's eyes widened. "Great, he was observant too. Thank you, Captain Obvious. Any other brilliant facts you'd like to share?" The corner of his lips lifted slightly, but Chloe didn't have time for flirting or for analyzing how ridiculously attractive that smirk was. She tried to step away quickly but felt a tug on her dress. Looking down, to her absolute humiliation, she saw that the fabric had gotten caught on her own heel. Oh, fantastic. Because tripping alone wasn't enough, I had to get stuck too. The man crouched down without rushing, freeing the fabric with a swift motion. "You may now continue your suicide mission." I was already on my way. Before she could make her escape, he added, "I hope you have life insurance, because at this pace, you won't make it past the buffet." Chloe rolled her eyes, grabbed her things off the floor, and took off again, not looking back. But even in the middle of the chaos, his voice lingered in her head. "Don't look at him, don't look at him," Chloe kept repeating to herself like a mantra as she slipped into place among the bridesmaids. The ceremony had already begun, and the bride, her best friend Sophia, was shooting her a death glare. But Chloe could only focus on the imposing figure seated among the groomsmen, the man from the collision. He was right there in front of her, watching her again with that assessing gaze. "Who is that?" she whispered to one of the bridesmaids beside her. "James Fisher." "And why should I know who he is?" "Because he's one of the richest men in the country and the CEO of one of the world's biggest financial consulting firms." Chloe blinked, trying to process the information. "Oh, of course. Makes perfect sense that a billionaire spends his time saving clumsy bridesmaids in hotel hallways." Her friend stifled a quiet laugh. "He's a mystery cold, calculating, never gets involved with anyone, and they say he can end anyone's career with just one phone call." Chloe swallowed hard. Great. Not only had she nearly knocked him over, but she had also been rude to him. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. All right, the wedding was happening. She just needed to survive the ceremony, avoid any more disasters, and most importantly, stop looking at James Fisher. Except that when she opened her eyes again, he was still watching her, and he raised an eyebrow, as if he knew exactly what she was thinking. A shiver ran down Chloe's spine. Something told her this night was just beginning. Let's play a little game with those who only read the comments. Type pizza in the comments. Only those who got this far will understand. Now let's continue with the story. Chloe was never the kind of person who got intimidated easily. But at that moment, sitting among the other bridesmaids and trying to focus on the ceremony, she could feel the weight of that gaze on her. James Fisher. She didn't need to look to know he was still watching. She could feel it. It was as if the entire room had faded away, leaving only that intense, and enigmatic presence. "You've been playing with your hair for 5 minutes." The bridesmaid next to her pulled her back to reality. Chloe immediately stopped, feeling her face heat up. "Have I?" "Yes. And guess what? He's still looking at you." Chloe closed her eyes for a second. Great, just what she needed. Why would a billionaire CEO be interested in staring at me? I'm just an architect who almost knocked him over. Her friend shrugged. Who knows? Maybe he likes a challenge. Chloe sighed and tried to focus on the ceremony. But even when the bride and groom exchanged vows and the guests let out sentimental sighs, she couldn't shake the feeling. The wedding reception was in full swing. The ballroom glowed with golden lights. Soft music filled the air, and guests moved between elegantly decorated tables, while waiters carried trays of champagne glasses. Chloe tried to stay on task, helping Sophia, making sure the bride was okay, and most importantly, avoiding any more embarrassing moments. But the universe, as always, seemed to have other plans. As she reached for a glass of wine from a waiter's tray, she turned too quickly and collided with something solid once again. The dark liquid splashed. Time froze. She held her breath, watching the disaster unfold in slow motion. The red stain spread across the perfect fabric of a black suit. Chloe looked up in horror and met James Fisher's blue eyes staring back at her. "Tell me this didn't just happen," she whispered, still holding the empty glass. James glanced down at his shirt, then back at her, his expression unreadable. "Well, it did." Chloe swallowed hard. "I'll grab a napkin." "No, wait, I can clean." Before she could finish, he calmly removed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. "Relax. It's just wine." She blinked, surprised. "You're not going to sue me or throw me out of the party?" The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "Not yet. But if you'd like to make it up to me, you could join me at the bar." Chloe blinked again. "Was that an invitation? More like an attempt. Depends on your answer." She glanced around, looking for an escape. But the truth was, despite everything, there was something about him that intrigued her. Maybe it was the calm, the quiet confidence in his voice. Maybe it was the way his gaze always seemed to study her with silent interest. Or maybe it was just curiosity. "Okay, but I get to choose the drinks." James nodded toward the bar. "Surprise me." The ballroom's bar was luxurious but quiet at that moment. Only a few guests sat at the counter, making the space feel more intimate. Chloe settled onto one of the high stools and crossed her arms. "I should order something ridiculously expensive, just to see your reaction." James tilted his head. "You think I'd care about the price of a drink? That's exactly why it would be fun." He chuckled, and a small shiver ran down her spine. James Fisher laughing now, that was a rare sight. The bartender approached, and Chloe placed her order, 2 shots of whiskey. James raised an eyebrow. "Impressive." She shrugged. "Did you think I'd order a fruit cocktail?" "I think you like to surprise people." The whiskey arrived, and she picked up her glass, studying it for a moment. "So, James Fisher, tell me," she turned to him, a small smile playing on her lips. "Why is a high-powered CEO at a wedding that clearly doesn't fit his reserved style?" He swirled his drink before answering. "Because I'm the groom's best man. And because your social life consists of boring corporate events?" James laughed again, and Chloe felt an odd sense of satisfaction. "Maybe. But what about you?" "I'm the bridesmaid of honor, which means I'm here out of duty, not choice." "And yet you seem to be enjoying yourself." She took a sip of whiskey, feeling the warmth slide down her throat. "Well, the night got a lot more interesting after I spilled wine on the guest of honor and almost knocked him over in the hallway." Chloe rolled her eyes. "You're never going to let that go, are you?" "Probably not." They fell into silence for a moment, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind that carried something unspoken, something lingering between them, growing slowly. Chloe looked away, pretending to focus on her drink. "So, do you always look at people like that?" "Like what?" "Like you're trying to figure them out." James smirked. "Only when I think it's worth the effort." Chloe's heart skipped a beat. What was happening here? She took a deep breath and downed the rest of her whiskey in one go. "This was fun, but I have to get back to the bride." James didn't try to stop her. He just watched as she stood up, his gaze still fixed on her. "See you around, Chloe." She hesitated for a second, then gave a small smile. "See you around, Mr. Fisher." But as she walked away, she had a feeling this wouldn't be their last conversation. The wedding was still lively, but Chloe felt that something inside her had changed after that conversation with James Fisher, something she couldn't quite define, but that made her heart beat a little faster than usual. She walked back to the bridesmaids' table and picked up a glass of champagne, trying to ignore the fact that, just a few feet away, James was still watching her. Sophia appeared beside her with a teasing smile. "I saw you and the mysterious groomsman had an interesting moment at the bar." Chloe rolled her eyes. "It was just casual conversation. Nothing special." "Nothing special?" Sophia raised an eyebrow. "That man couldn't take his eyes off you during the ceremony, and now, even from across the room, he's still looking." Chloe let out a nervous laugh and took a sip of her drink. "You're exaggerating. He's just intriguing." "Intriguing?" Sophia chuckled. "Chloe, that man is one of the most powerful billionaires in the country, and from what people say, he doesn't get involved with anyone. If he's interested in you, it's because he sees something different." Chloe shrugged, but couldn't hide the blush rising to her cheeks. "He just likes analyzing people, that's all. And honestly, I'm just an ordinary architect. There's no reason for someone like him to notice me." Sophia sighed and shook her head. "Oh, Chloe, you really don't see it, do you?" Before Chloe could respond, one of the groomsmen came over to ask Sophia for a dance, leaving her alone again, but not for long. "Are you going to keep pretending you haven't noticed? We've been looking at each other for hours?" Chloe closed her eyes for a second, before slowly turning around. James was there, too close. "I wasn't looking at you," Chloe said quickly, trying to sound indifferent. James tilted his head slightly, studying her with that intense gaze that made her heart race. "You're really bad at lying, aren't you?" Chloe crossed her arms and let out a sarcastic laugh. "And are you always like this? Or do you just enjoy making people uncomfortable?" The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "I like to observe to understand how people react. And so far, you've been an interesting surprise. Good for you. Now, if you'll excuse me." She tried to step away, but James gently took her wrist, just enough to make her stop. "Dance with me." Chloe's eyes widened. "What? One dance, that's all?" She looked at the dance floor, where couples were already moving to the soft music, then turned back to him. "And what if I say no? I'd say you're lying again." Chloe bit her lower lip, fighting the smile threatening to appear. "You're unbearably arrogant, you know that?" James took a step back and extended his hand. "And yet you're still here, considering my offer." Chloe took a deep breath. What harm could it do? She placed her hand in his. As James led her to the dance floor, Chloe felt as if the world around them had disappeared. His arms wrapped around her waist with quiet confidence, while his firm hand held hers. "You've done this before," Chloe commented, trying to ignore their closeness. "Danced a few times, but not like this." She lifted her eyes, meeting his up close. "And what's different this time?" James studied her for a moment before answering, "You." A shiver ran through Chloe's skin. The room was full, but in that moment, it felt like only the two of them existed. And for the first time that night, she let herself stop avoiding his gaze. Because deep down, she knew something was happening here, something she couldn't ignore, and maybe she didn't even want to. Chloe wasn't sure what was happening. Well, she knew she was dancing with James Fisher, the most reserved, intimidating, and apparently persistent man she'd ever met, but at the same time, she didn't know why it felt so natural. The ballroom was packed, but everything around them blurred as he led her across the floor with effortless precision. She had never realized how much she liked dancing until that moment, or maybe it was just the fact that James seemed to know exactly how to hold her hand, how to touch her waist, how to make every move feel light, effortless. "You're surprised." His deep voice resonated near her ear, sending a shiver down her spine. "Should I be? You didn't expect me to know how to dance." Chloe narrowed her eyes at him. "No, I didn't. But I guess it makes sense. I bet you learned this the same way you learned everything else in life, because you needed to keep up appearances." James smirked, a mysterious glint in his eyes. "Are you always this direct?" "Only when I'm curious." "Then tell me, Chloe, what else makes you curious?" Chloe opened her mouth to respond, but his gaze threw her off balance for a second. She forgot what she was going to say. "That's not fair." "What isn't?" "You distracting me with those eyes and expecting me to form a coherent sentence." James let out a low chuckle. "It's not my fault you get distracted so easily." She sighed and decided to step away, but as soon as she took a step back, James caught her hand. "Already running away?" Chloe raised an eyebrow. "I don't run away." He studied her for a moment, then prove it. Chloe crossed her arms. "How?" He hesitated for a second, then said, "Meet me for coffee tomorrow." Chloe hesitated. The idea of seeing James again the next day was tempting, but also risky. Luckily for her, the music ended right at that moment, and she slowly stepped away, as if nothing had happened. James just stood there, watching her with a smile. The party was winding down, guests were starting to say their goodbyes. The bride and groom were busy with the last well-wishers, and Chloe felt it was the right time to leave. It had been a long day, and her mind was full of scattered thoughts. She walked out of the ballroom toward the hotel entrance, where the guests' cars were parked. She pulled out her phone to call a ride, but a notification popped up on the screen. No drivers available at the moment. Great. She took a deep breath, considering waiting a little longer, when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Looks like your escape plan failed." Chloe slowly turned around and found James Fisher standing next to her, hands in his suit pockets, with that observant look that unsettled her. "I'm not running away. I'm just going home." "Without a ride?" "That's just a detail." James tilted his head slightly, as if analyzing the situation. Then, without hesitation, he said, "I'll take you." Chloe frowned. "You what?" "I'll drive you home. It's late, and I don't think it's safe for a woman to be waiting alone at this hour." She crossed her arms. "I can take care of myself. I never said you couldn't. But why wait when I'm already leaving?" Chloe bit her lip. Accepting a ride from James felt wrong for so many reasons. First, being in a car with him meant there'd be no escape from his teasing. Second, there was something about him that made her heart race in a strange way. She glanced at the app again, hoping a driver would magically appear. But the screen stayed the same. "Fine," she finally said, "but only because I have no other option." James didn't respond. He simply opened the car door, waiting for her to get in. Chloe took a deep breath and settled into the passenger seat. As soon as he got in and started the engine, silence filled the car, and it was a heavy silence. The city lights flickered through the windows as they drove. Chloe fidgeted with her fingers, unsure if she should start a conversation or just wait for the ride to be over. James, on the other hand, seemed perfectly comfortable with the silence. "Do you always drive alone?" she finally asked, just to break the tension. He glanced at her briefly before answering. "I like driving at night. Helps me think." "Oh, so you do think?" she teased, raising an eyebrow. James let out a small smile, one of those fleeting ones that did more damage than they should. "You don't think I do?" "I think you're a mystery. And does that bother you?" Chloe hesitated for a second before answering. "I think so." "Why?" "Because you have this intimidating energy, like you're always in control, like nothing ever shakes you." James was quiet for a few seconds, as if considering her words. Then, without taking his eyes off the road, he said calmly, "You have no idea the effect you have on people." Chloe's eyes widened as she turned to look at him. "What?" He didn't answer right away, just kept that mysterious half-smile. His fingers relaxed on the wheel. "You talk as if I'm the only hard-to-read person in this conversation," he continued. "But Chloe, I don't think you realize how much you draw people's attention." She looked away, feeling something unexpected rise in her chest. It was just a casual comment, or maybe it wasn't. The car stopped at a red light, and James turned his head toward her. "You feel uncomfortable around me because you think I analyze you too much. But the truth is, you intrigue me, and I like understanding the things that intrigue me." Chloe opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She wasn't sure whether to be annoyed by his boldness or flattered by it. The rest of the drive to Chloe's apartment was quiet, but not in an awkward way. It was the kind of silence filled with unspoken thoughts, as if both of them were processing what had just happened. When James pulled up in front of her building, Chloe let out a quiet sigh of relief. She was grateful to finally be home, yet at the same time, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had happened between them that night. She turned to him, feeling the need to say something before leaving. "Thank you for the ride." James tilted his head slightly, his eyes studying her in a way that made her heart race. "It was my pleasure, Chloe." She hesitated. Something in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. Not wanting to linger in that strange feeling, she opened the car door and stepped out, carefully closing it behind her. As she climbed the steps to the entrance, she suddenly felt the urge to look back, and when she did, she saw James still there, watching her. Chloe quickly looked away and walked inside. The moment the elevator doors closed behind her, she leaned against the wall and let out the breath she'd been holding. What just happened? The next morning, Chloe walked into the construction firm's office, balancing a cup of coffee in one hand and a few reports in the other. After a weekend spent trying not to think about James Fisher, she was determined to go back to her normal routine. but something inside her felt restless. She had convinced herself she would never see him again after all. He was a billionaire CEO who moved in circles of high-profile investors and boardroom meetings, while she was an architect focused on her projects. Their worlds had no reason to cross again, or so she thought. Chloe stepped into the conference room, holding a folder with project documents in one hand and her coffee in the other. Her colleagues were already there, chatting, while Edward Harris, the firm's director, flipped through some pages about the Richmond Tower, the company's most ambitious project. She took her seat, settling in for another one of those long technical meetings. But as soon as she lifted her eyes to see who was sitting at the head of the table, her heart dropped. James Fisher. He was there, dressed in a flawless suit, his serious and analytical gaze scanning the documents, as if this were just another business deal. Chloe froze. No, this cannot be happening. As if sensing her presence, James lifted his eyes slowly, and for a brief moment, the world stood still. Her blue eyes met his, and it was as if the air in the room suddenly became heavier. But to her complete shock, James remained composed and simply greeted her in a neutral, professional tone. "Miss Carter." She blinked, nearly dropping her coffee. Is he pretending this is normal? Noticing the awkward silence, Edward quickly stepped in. "Chloe, this is James Fisher, our new lead investor for the Richmond Tower project." Her stomach twisted. "What?" "Mr. Fisher and his investment firm have acquired a stake in the project's funding. He'll be our strategic partner moving forward." Chloe looked from James to Edward, then to her colleagues, realizing that no one else seemed surprised by this news, no one except her. James said nothing. He just watched calmly as she processed the bombshell that had just dropped. Chloe took a deep breath and forced a professional smile. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Fisher." "Thank you," he replied, offering a slight smile, but his eyes said something else entirely. After the meeting, Chloe was determined to get out of there as fast as possible. She needed air, a minute to process what had just happened. But of course, James Fisher wasn't going to let it go that easily. She barely stepped out of the conference room when she heard his voice behind her. "Chloe." She closed her eyes for a second before slowly turning around. "What is it?" James studied her, crossing his arms. His perfectly tailored suit only added to his effortlessly commanding presence. "No friendlier greeting?" She scoffed, folding her arms as well. "Are you my boss now?" "Not exactly, but we'll have to work together." Chloe felt her throat go dry. "Did you already know?" James tilted his head slightly, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "I found out the moment I saw your name on the project team. And you didn't think that would be awkward?" "I thought it would be interesting." Chloe let out a disbelieving laugh. "Oh, so now fate is a game to you?" "I'd say fate has a peculiar sense of humor." She narrowed her eyes. "Or maybe you manipulated it." James smiled slowly. "You're giving me too much credit, Chloe." She wasn't sure if she wanted to run away or throw her coffee at him. But one thing she knew for sure, there was no escaping this anymore. The Horizon construction office was completely silent, except for the sound of keys being pressed rapidly and pages turning. Chloe stared at the documents on her desk, trying to ignore the presence of James Fisher, who was sitting in a chair on the other side of the meeting room. After the shocking revelation that he was one of the main investors in the Richmond Tower project, she had no choice but to face reality. They would have to work together for the next few months. And James seemed to be enjoying that a little too much. "Do you always frown like that when you're focused?" His voice interrupted her thoughts. Chloe clenched her teeth before looking up. "Do you always ask random questions when you should be working?" James tilted his head, a slight smile on his lips. "Only when I'm trying to understand someone." Chloe crossed her arms, suspicious. "And why do you want to understand me?" He leaned his elbows on the table, watching her with that intense gaze that made her stomach turn. "Because you intrigue me, Chloe." She didn't know how to respond. She felt her face heat up, so she quickly looked back at the papers. But James didn't stop there. "Let's go to dinner." Chloe blinked, surprised. "What?" "We need to go over the project details. It'll be more productive than staying late at the office." "So this isn't really an invitation, it's just a way to make me work overtime?" "If that makes it easier to accept, then yes." Chloe sighed, knowing she didn't have much choice. "Fine, but I get to pick the restaurant." James smiled, and for some reason, it gave her butterflies. The restaurant was small and cozy, a complete contrast to the fancy places Chloe imagined James usually went to. You really brought me to a place this simple? He asked, looking around. I'm a woman of simple tastes, Mr. Fisher, he chuckled, picking up the menu. And you think a CEO like me wouldn't enjoy this? I think CEOs like you only know menus with unpronounceable names and dishes that cost half my salary. James raised an amused eyebrow. You might be right, but it's always good to try new things. Chloe shook her head, laughing. If you still say that after tasting the food here, then I'll believe you. As they ordered, Chloe noticed that, for the first time since they started working together, James seemed more relaxed. The usual tension between them was still there, but there was something different about the way he spoke, as if he was enjoying the moment. Now tell me, he started, resting his arms on the table. Why architecture? Chloe hesitated. What do you mean? Was this always your dream? She shrugged. Since I was a kid, I always liked creating things, transforming spaces. Architecture gives me the chance to change people's lives. James nodded, seeming genuinely interested. And have you? Chloe smiled, remembering one of her first projects. There was a client once, an elderly woman, who wanted to remodel her home to accommodate her grandson, who had been in an accident and was now paralyzed. When we finished the project, she cried. She said it would change his life. James was silent for a moment before saying, "That's admirable." She laughed softly. Don't compliment me like that, Mr. Fisher. I'm used to you challenging me at work. Maybe I just like seeing you annoyed. Chloe felt her face warm up. You're impossible, and yet you're still here. The waiter brought their food, cutting the moment short. Chloe quickly grabbed her utensils, trying to ignore the fact that James was right. She was still there, and she was enjoying it more than she should. Hours later, it was late when they left the restaurant. The city lights illuminated the streets, and the cool night air was a relief after the warmth inside. Are you sleepy? James asked as they walked to the car. Not really, but if you're planning to take me back to the office, I'll pretend I am. He laughed. Not at all. It's a nice night. Let's take a walk. Chloe raised an eyebrow. James Fisher wandering around with no clear purpose? That's new. You said it's good to try new things, didn't you? She rolled her eyes but didn't refuse. They strolled slowly through the quiet streets, no rush, just watching the city and talking about random things. Chloe never would have imagined James being this relaxed. Have you always been like this? She asked suddenly. Like what? Reserved, cold. James looked thoughtful. Life has taught me to be cautious, but that doesn't mean I don't feel anything. She hadn't expected that answer. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with something unspoken. Chloe glanced at him and realized that, for the first time, James Fisher seemed human, and that was dangerous, very dangerous. Chloe woke up that morning with her mind in a haze. She was still processing the night before the dinner, the unexpectedly easy conversation, and the fact that, against all logic, she had enjoyed being with James Fisher. That wasn't good. That wasn't what should be happening. She got up quickly, as if keeping busy could push the thoughts away. She needed to work. She needed to focus on the Richmond Tower project, and more importantly, keep her distance from James. But as soon as she walked into the Horizon construction office, she realized that wouldn't be so easy. James was already in the conference room when Chloe arrived. He was sitting at the head of the table, his expression calm and focused on the documents in front of him, as if nothing had happened between them the night before. She hesitated before stepping in, took a deep breath, and walked forward. "Good morning," she said, forcing a formality she didn't feel. James looked up at her and gave a small smile. "Good morning, Chloe. Did you sleep well?" She clenched her teeth. He knew exactly what he was doing. "Perfectly," she replied. James nodded, clearly amused by her response. The rest of the team started arriving, and the meeting began. Chloe forced herself to focus on the technical details of the project, the structural adjustments, the budget, but ignoring his presence was impossible. Every now and then, she felt his gaze on her, and every time it happened, her heartbeat quickened. But she wouldn't let it show. After an intense hour-long meeting, the team started to disperse. Chloe gathered her notes and stood up, ready to leave, before James could say anything. But just as she turned to go, he called out, "Chloe." She froze for a second, then forced herself to look completely indifferent before turning to face him. "Yes?" James closed his folder and stood up, adjusting his jacket. "I need to discuss a few project decisions with you." Chloe took a deep breath. This was work, just work. "Okay. Can we do it now?" "Of course. he said, picking up his coffee and motioning for her to follow him. They walked to the office balcony, a quiet space often used for informal meetings. The morning sun lit up the city below, creating a sharp contrast with the tension hanging in the air. Chloe leaned against the railing and crossed her arms. "What exactly do you want to talk about?" James studied her for a moment before answering. "Last night." She stiffened instantly. "Last night?" "Yes." Chloe narrowed her eyes. "I thought we were here to talk about the project." James gave her that small, dangerously charming smile. "We can talk about both," she huffed. "Look, James, what happened last night was a work dinner. That's all. Are you sure?" Chloe opened her mouth to respond, but something in his expression made her hesitate. She wasn't sure, and he knew it, which was exactly why she decided to end the conversation right there. "I have to go," she said, turning to leave. James watched her for a moment before saying something that made her stop in her tracks. "You're pulling away on purpose." A shiver ran down her spine. "This has nothing to do with you." "Yes, it does." She turned to him, annoyed. "Why do you think everything revolves around you?" James took a step closer, his presence filling the space between them. "Because I know this game, Chloe." She held her breath. "And what game is that?" "The game of distance. You're pushing me away because you feel something you don't want to admit." Chloe's stomach twisted. "You're completely wrong." James tilted his head slightly, as if analyzing her every reaction. "Then look me in the eye and tell me you didn't feel anything last night." Chloe swallowed hard. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to say that none of it meant anything. But deep down, she knew that would be a lie, and the problem was, James knew it too. The silence between them was heavy, filled with something neither of them wanted to name. Finally, Chloe took a step back. "This doesn't matter. I have work to do." And she walked away before he could say anything else. But as she left, she felt a weight in her chest because she knew that, sooner or later, she wouldn't be able to run anymore. Chloe spent the rest of the day trying to ignore the conversation with James on the balcony, trying to convince herself that he was wrong, that she didn't feel anything, or at least that's what she kept telling herself. But as the hours passed, ignoring the truth became harder and harder. The tension between them had been growing since Sophia's wedding. At first, she tried to dismiss it as nothing more than a bit of teasing, a game of provocations that meant nothing. But now, his presence unsettled her in a way she could no longer deny, and James knew it. At the end of the workday, Chloe gathered her things and headed to the office kitchen, needing a moment to breathe before going home. She grabbed a glass of water and leaned against the counter, closing her eyes for a few seconds. That's when she felt someone standing beside her. She knew exactly who it was before even opening her eyes. "You're avoiding me again." James's voice was low, controlled, but there was something deeper beneath it. Chloe took a deep breath before turning to face him. "I'm not avoiding you. I'm just trying to work without distractions." He raised an eyebrow. "So now I'm a distraction? You always have been." The words slipped out before she could stop them. The moment she realized what she had just said, her face grew warm. But James only gave a slight smile, as if he had been expecting that answer all along. Finally, he said, his voice dropping even lower. Chloe crossed her arms. "Finally what?" "You're finally admitting it." She let out a frustrated breath, looking away. "I'm not admitting anything." "Yes, you are." He took a step closer, and suddenly, the air around them felt warmer. "Chloe, you can keep pretending this isn't happening, but we both know it is." She swallowed hard. "You want to know what's happening, James? I don't have time for this." He didn't look surprised. He just studied her for a moment before replying, "You have time for everything, except admitting how you feel." Chloe closed her eyes for a second. This was a dangerous game. This can't happen. "Why not?" She opened her eyes and met his gaze. "Because we work together." James's smile was slow, and in that moment, Chloe knew he wasn't going to give up easily. "And what if we didn't?" She held her breath. James leaned in slightly, close enough that she could feel his presence like a storm about to break. "Tell me, Chloe, if I weren't your investor, if you weren't so caught up in these rules and boundaries, what would you do?" Chloe couldn't answer because deep down, she already knew, and James did too. The silence between them stretched, heavy with something undeniable. Finally, Chloe took a step back, breaking the moment. "I have to go." James didn't stop her. He just watched as she walked away. And the moment Chloe stepped through the door, she knew nothing would ever be the same again. The next day, Chloe tried to stick to her routine after the confrontation with James in the Horizon construction office kitchen. But the truth was, Nothing felt normal anymore. The tension between them was growing, and she knew that, sooner or later, she'd have to make a decision. But what kind of decision? She wasn't sure. Deep down, there was a voice inside her that wanted to just let it happen, but reason always won. Working with James meant that any involvement between them would lead to complications, professionalism, ethics. Reputation. There was too much at stake. So she decided that keeping her distance was the best option. But James Fisher wasn't the kind of man who took no easily. It was nearly midnight when Chloe finally managed to disconnect from work after reviewing some blueprints for the Richmond Tower project. She took a shower and collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. Her thoughts were a mess, and she needed a distraction. Then her phone vibrated. She reached for it, expecting some random notification, but her heart skipped a beat when she saw the name on the screen, James Fisher. She hesitated before opening the message. "James, the first need to talk to you. It's important." Chloe closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Part of her wanted to ignore it, but the other part, the one completely out of control lately, needed to know what he wanted. "Is this about the project?" "No." Her throat went dry. "Then it can wait until tomorrow." She locked her phone before he could reply and leaned her head against the back of the couch, feeling mentally drained. But the truth? She knew this wouldn't end here, and she was right. The next morning when she arrived at the office, Chloe immediately noticed that James seemed even more intense than usual. He didn't try to talk to her directly, but his eyes said everything he wanted to say, and that made her nervous. During a project meeting, James made a point of provoking her whenever he could, challenging her ideas, questioning her proposals, creating an atmosphere filled with tension. By the time it was finally over, Chloe was so frustrated that she decided she wouldn't just let it slide. As soon as the other employees left, she walked up to him. "Can we talk?" she asked, keeping her voice firm. James closed his folder and looked at her with that calm expression, but one full of hidden intentions. "Of course." They walked into an empty meeting room. Chloe closed the door behind her and crossed her arms. "What was that? What was what?" James replied, as if he had no idea what she was talking about. "The constant provocation during the meeting. Are you testing my limits?" He tilted his head slightly, as if studying her every move. "And if I am?" Chloe huffed, irritated. "What do you want, James?" He stepped closer, and Chloe felt her heart race. "You know what I want." She swallowed hard. "This can't happen." "Why not?" Because it's complicated." "Everything in life is complicated, Chloe." She felt her patience running out. "James, we work together. That's already a huge problem." He didn't answer right away. He just watched her for a few seconds, before finally saying something that changed everything. "What if I told you I'm leaving the project?" Chloe's eyes widened. "What?" James took a deep breath. "I'm transferring my share in the Richmond Tower to another investor." Chloe felt her stomach twist. "This is crazy. Why?" He gave her a slight smile. "Because now there's no reason for you to keep running away." She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You can't just walk away from an investment because of this." "I can do whatever I want, Chloe. And what I want is you." The silence was deafening. Chloe didn't know what to say. Everything she had been trying to avoid, all the excuses she had used to push him away, were gone now. And that scared her more than anything. She needed to get out of there. "I need some time to think." James simply nodded, his gaze intense. "Think, Chloe. But think carefully." She left the room quickly, her heart pounding. But deep down, she knew she wouldn't be able to run for much longer. Chloe walked out of the meeting room, feeling like the ground beneath her was crumbling. James Fisher had actually done it. He gave up a multi-million-dollar investment because of her. His words kept echoing in her head. "I can do whatever I want, Chloe. And what I want is you." She needed to get away, to breathe, to think. She needed a way out. But no matter where she looked, all she could see was his gaze, the way he watched her, as if he already knew the answer she refused to admit. Chloe walked to her office without noticing the people around her. She grabbed her things quickly and left without saying a word to anyone. She couldn't deal with this right now. It was already nighttime when she realized she had been wandering aimlessly for almost an hour. Her legs were tired, her mind was racing, but no answer seemed satisfying. She stepped into a quiet cafe, ordered a strong coffee, and sat by the window, watching the city outside. Chloe had never been the kind of person to give in easily to anything or anyone. She had always been rational, always put her career and independence above everything else. And then James Fisher came along. He challenged her, provoked her, made her feel things she didn't want to feel. And now, he had torn down the last barrier she had used as an excuse to keep him away. "What if I weren't your investor? What would you do?" She closed her eyes and gripped her cup tightly. Chloe knew the answer, but admitting it was another story. By the time she got home, it was past 11. The apartment was dark, silent. She tossed her bag onto the couch and let out a long sigh. Her phone vibrated. She picked it up, and when she saw the name on the screen, her heart pounded. James Fisher. She hesitated for a moment. She could ignore it, pretend she didn't see it. But then she noticed something that made her freeze. It wasn't a message. It was a call. He was calling. She swallowed hard before answering. Chloe. His voice was deep, steady, and more than ever filled with hidden intentions. "What is it, James?" She tried to sound indifferent. "Can we talk?" Chloe closed her eyes and tried to stay in control. "We've talked enough at work." "I'm not talking about work." The silence between them stretched. Chloe felt her chest tighten. "I don't know if I can deal with this right now." "Then tell me when." She had no answer. James sighed on the other end of the line. "I'll see you tomorrow then, James." "Good night, Chloe." The call ended before she could protest. She stared at her phone for a while, her breathing unsteady. And in that moment, she realized something that was both terrifying and inevitable. She didn't want to run. She wanted to see him. The next day started like any other, or at least Chloe tried to pretend it did. But with each passing minute, her anxiety grew because she knew James would come for her. And he never did anything halfway. By the time the clock struck 6, Chloe was already gathering her things to leave. She needed to go home, step away from everything, clear her head. But as soon as she stepped out of the office, James was already there. He was leaning against his car, dressed in a flawless suit, with that intense gaze that was impossible to ignore. Chloe stopped in her tracks. "Are you really going to pretend you didn't see me?" he asked, not moving. She took a deep breath before stepping forward. "What do you want, James?" He opened the car door. "Get in." "I'm not." Chloe closed her eyes, knowing there was no point in fighting it. She wanted to go, but admitting that was another matter. So, in silence, she got into the car. They drove without speaking. The tension between them was palpable. James didn't say where they were going, but Chloe knew he was heading to his penthouse. And for the first time, she didn't argue. The car stopped, and James stepped out first, opening her door. Chloe hesitated for a second before finally getting out. The elevator ride was silent, and when the doors opened, James led her into the spacious living room. Chloe couldn't stop looking at him. Every little detail about this man made her uneasy. He took off his jacket, unbuttoned the top of his shirt, and grabbed 2 glasses of wine, handing one to her. She took it and drank a sip, trying to ignore the fact that he was dangerously close. "Why am I here?" she finally asked. James studied her for a moment before answering. "Because you didn't want to run." Her heart pounded. "And what if this all goes wrong?" He took a step closer. "And what if it goes right?" Chloe swallowed hard. Every part of her told her to leave, to run while she still could. But she couldn't lie to herself anymore. She wanted him. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. The fear, the doubts had all disappeared when James cupped her face and kissed her. And Chloe knew right then, there was no turning back. James's kiss was everything Chloe had feared and wanted at the same time. It was intense, sure, without hesitation, as if he had always known this moment would come sooner or later. And she, who had fought against this for so long, couldn't resist anymore. She wanted him. James pulled her closer, one hand resting on her waist, while the other gently held her face. Chloe felt her mind go blank, her hands gripping his shoulders as if she needed something to hold on to. Time seemed to stop, but then reality hit her like a wave. What was she doing? Her breathing was uneven, her heart racing in her chest. Chloe pulled back suddenly, pushing James away just enough to break the contact. "I can't." James stood still for a moment, watching her. He didn't look surprised, if anything. It seemed like he had expected this reaction. "Why?" he asked quietly. Chloe ran a hand over her face, feeling completely torn. "This can't happen, James." He took a step back, but his eyes never left hers. "Give me a real reason." Chloe tried to organize her thoughts, but everything inside her was too much of a mess. "This is crazy. And what's normal?" he countered. She clenched her jaw, frustrated. "If I give in, then what? What happens next?" James crossed his arms, his expression perfectly composed. "We figure it out together." She let out a humorless laugh. "Just like that? Just like that?" She felt a tightness in her chest. "I can't, James." He only nodded slowly, but what he said next shook her even more. "I won't force you, Chloe. But stop lying to yourself." She held her breath. The silence between them stretched on. Then she turned and walked away without looking back, but knowing that everything had changed forever. The days that followed were a real test of endurance. Chloe avoided James at the office. As much as she could, she kept her answers short during meetings, avoided eye contact, and even stayed a few minutes late to make sure she wouldn't run into him. But he didn't make it easy. James didn't push for conversations, but he also didn't hide the fact that he was waiting for her. Every time their eyes met, Chloe felt the same inner conflict, and it was tearing her apart. Until one night, everything finally collapsed. Chloe was leaving the office late. She had been reviewing some project blueprints and lost track of time. By the time she finally gathered her things and stepped out, the building was almost empty, only a few security lights lit up the hallway. And then, as soon as she turned the corner, there he was. James stood near the parking lot exit, leaning against his car, as if he knew she would appear at that exact moment. Chloe froze for a second. She thought about ignoring him and walking away, but she knew she couldn't because deep down, she wanted to see him. She wanted to hear his voice. She was tired of fighting this. Chloe closed her eyes for a moment before making a decision. She walked toward him. "Are you waiting for me?" James raised an eyebrow but didn't look surprised. "What do you think?" She let out a heavy sigh. "James, get in the car." Chloe crossed her arms. "And what if I say no?" He simply smiled. "You won't." She clenched her jaw, frustrated by how certain he seemed, but deep down, she knew he was right. Chloe got in the car. James walked around to the driver's side, got in, and started the engine. "Where are we going?" she asked. "You already know." And she did. James's apartment was just as she remembered, impeccable, organized, and effortlessly elegant. But this time, something felt different. Maybe it was the fact that she wasn't trying to run away anymore. Maybe it was the fact that, for the first time, she wanted to be there. James took off his jacket and turned to her. "Chloe." She lifted her eyes to him, not looking away this time. "Say it." He stepped closer, stopping just near enough for her to feel the warmth of his presence. "What do you want?" His voice was calm and steady, but it sent a shiver through her. Chloe didn't answer right away because she already knew what she wanted. She had known from the very beginning, and now there were no more excuses. "I want you." James smiled slowly, then stopped running. She didn't reply because, for the first time, she didn't need to. And when James took her hand and gently pulled her closer, Chloe knew there was no turning back. She had crossed the line between reason and desire, and she didn't regret it. The next morning, Chloe woke up to the soft morning light filtering through the curtains. It took a few seconds for her to process where she was: the spacious bedroom, the crisp sheets, the faint scent of wood and cologne in the air. Then she remembered. She turned slowly and saw James Fisher still asleep beside her. He lay on his side, his breathing deep and steady, completely at ease, unlike her. Chloe couldn't relax. What had she done last night? The answer was obvious, but the real question was, what did it mean now? She carefully slipped out of bed, gathering her clothes from the floor. Her movements were slow, trying not to wake him. She needed a moment to think, but just as she picked up her blouse and started putting it on, she heard his voice behind her. Running away again? Chloe froze. She turned slowly and found James awake, watching with that intense gaze. He was propped against the pillow, the sheets resting at his waist, his hair slightly mussed in a way that was frustratingly attractive. She swallowed hard. "I'm not running." James raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Then why does it look like you're trying to leave without waking me?" Chloe clenched her teeth. "Because I needed a moment to think." He was quiet for a moment, just watching her, as if trying to read her thoughts. Then he sighed. "Chloe." She hesitated. "James, Chloe." He held out his hand. She knew that if she took it, there would be no more excuses. But before she could change her mind, she stepped forward and placed her hand in his. James pulled her back onto the bed, his eyes locked on hers. "Do you regret it?" Chloe took a deep breath. She should, but she didn't. "No." James's lips curved into a small smile. Then stop overthinking. She wished she could, but the truth was, her mind was a mess. "What now?" she asked softly. James ran a finger along her cheek, tracing an invisible path. "Now we see where this takes us." Chloe held his gaze because, for the first time, She realized James was just as caught up in this as she was, and that scared her even more. In the days that followed, Chloe and James fell into an unspoken rhythm, a routine neither of them defined but both understood. Let's have a little fun with those who only read the comments. Type Pepsi in the comments. Only those who made it this far will get it. Now let's continue the story. At work, they kept the same professional posture as always, no touches, no lingering looks, no sign that anything had changed. But it had, and the tension between them only grew stronger each day. Every time they were alone in the office, Chloe could feel the electricity in the air. Every conversation felt loaded with unspoken intentions. Every glance felt like a shared secret. And at night, they couldn't stay away from each other. It was as if something invisible kept pulling them back again and again, until one day, it wasn't enough anymore. Chloe was at her desk, reviewing the final adjustments to the Richmond Tower project, when her phone vibrated. She picked it up and saw a short message. "James, come to my office." She frowned. An unexpected meeting? She put away her papers, grabbed her tablet, and walked down the hallway, trying not to look suspicious. But as soon as she stepped into his office and closed the door, she realized this wasn't just another meeting. James was standing by the window, hands in his suit pockets, looking out at the city. He looked tense. Chloe shut the door behind her and crossed her arms. "What is it?" James turned slowly, and in that moment, she knew something was wrong. "We need to talk." Chloe held her breath. He never started a conversation like that. "About what?" James took a step closer. "About us." Her stomach twisted. "What about us?" He took a deep breath, as if choosing his words carefully. "This is becoming more serious than I expected." Chloe's chest tightened. "And is that a problem?" James didn't answer right away, and that was enough for her to understand. A bitter taste filled her mouth. "Do you want to end this?" James ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. "I don't know." She stepped back. "You don't know?" He looked directly at her, his eyes full of conflict. "Chloe, you know I'm not the kind of guy who gets involved." Her chest ached. "Then why did you start this?" James said nothing, and at that moment, Chloe realized something. She was completely invested in this, and he still wasn't sure. Chloe let out a humorless laugh, shaking her head. "You say you're not the kind of guy who gets involved, but here you are involved." James clenched his jaw, as if he wanted to disagree but couldn't. Chloe sighed, trying to ignore the growing pain inside her. "If you're telling me this now, James, it's because you've already made up your mind." He said nothing, and that hurt more than any words ever could. Chloe wasn't the kind of woman who begged. She wouldn't change who she was for anyone. So she did the only thing she could. She took a step back and said, "All right." James looked surprised. "Chloe, you don't have to say anything else. I understand." She turned and walked out before he could see the tears forming in her eyes. Chloe didn't go home that night. She walked around the city for hours, trying to find a way not to feel what she was feeling, but it was impossible. She had fallen in love with James Fisher, and now she had to move on without him because, in the end, he was never ready for her. Chloe didn't go to work the next day. She spent the night staring at the ceiling, trying to find any way to make the ache in her chest disappear. But there was no easy solution. She had made the mistake of falling for James Fisher, and now was trying to get out before it was too late for him. The problem was, for her, it was already too late. The next morning, she sent a message to HR, letting them know she needed a day off. Then she turned off her phone and refused to look at it for the rest of the day. She needed space. When the second day without Chloe at work began, James knew he had made a mistake. He had spent the night sleepless, replaying every word of their conversation. "I'm not the kind of guy who gets involved." The look Chloe gave him in that moment haunted him because it wasn't true. He was involved more than he should be, more than he wanted to admit. He had become what he feared most, and for the first time in his life, he didn't know what to do about it. By late afternoon, Chloe heard the doorbell ring. She frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. But as soon as she opened the door, her heart stopped. James Fisher was standing there, hands in his coat pockets, his eyes intense and determined. She gripped the door tightly, ready to shut it immediately. "No," she said flatly. James didn't back away. "Can we talk? I have nothing to say to you, but I have something to say to you." She clenched her teeth. "I've already heard enough, James." He sighed, running a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. "I was wrong." Chloe felt a tightness in her chest but didn't give in. "Yes, you were. He looked at her, and for the first time, he seemed vulnerable. "Chloe, I'm not a man who deals well with emotions. That's never been part of my life. I never needed it." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, good for you. Now tell me, what does that have to do with me?" "It has everything to do with you, because you changed everything." She opened her mouth to reply, but no words came out. I wanted to walk away before it got worse, but the truth? It already has. Chloe held her breath. "What do you mean by that?" James did the last thing she expected. He stepped forward, cupped her face in his hands, and whispered, "I'm in love with you." She froze completely. "What?" He looked at her with all the honesty in the world. "I'm in love with you, Chloe, and I'm completely lost in it." Chloe's heart pounded, because she never imagined hearing those words from James Fisher. But then she realized something even more terrifying. She didn't want him to be lost. She wanted to find him. Chloe took a deep breath and held his hands. "Then stop running, James." He didn't answer. He just moved closer and kissed her, and this time, neither of them pulled away. The kiss between Chloe and James wasn't like the others. This time, there was no more uncertainty, no more running. It was real, final. James held her tightly, as if afraid she would disappear, while Chloe felt her heart racing in her chest. She never imagined he would say those words, "I'm in love with you." Those words echoed in her mind, and all she could do was kiss him back with all the intensity she had. When they finally pulled away, James rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed, as if savoring the moment. "This time I'm not letting you go," he whispered. Chloe smiled softly, her heart overflowing with happiness. "And what if I say I don't want to go?" James opened his eyes and looked at her, something new and intense shining in them. "Then there's nothing in this world that can stop me from making you mine." The months that followed were the happiest of Chloe's life. She and James finally accepted what they felt, and even though working together remained a challenge, they learned to balance it. On tense meeting days, they argued about contracts and deadlines. On quiet nights, they shared dinners, laughter, and stolen kisses in the kitchen. And for the first time, Chloe felt complete. She loved him and James, a man who had always been controlled, rational, and afraid of emotions, learned to love her in the deepest, truest way possible. But he knew something was still missing, and he had a plan for that. That night, James took Chloe out for a special dinner. They had been together for almost a year, and she sensed something in the air, but she had no idea what was about to happen. The restaurant had a private terrace, lit by soft lights that sparkled like stars. The atmosphere was elegant and intimate, and Chloe's heart raced when she noticed. James seemed more nervous than usual. "Are you okay?" she asked with a smile. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Then, before she could say another word, James stood up from his chair. Chloe frowned, confused. "James, what are you?" But her voice died in her throat the moment he got down on one knee. Chloe felt the world stop. The restaurant around them disappeared, the noise, the lights, the people, everything faded, except for James Fisher kneeling before her, holding an open velvet box with a stunning ring inside. His eyes were filled with emotion, but his voice was steady and certain when he finally spoke. "Chloe Carter, I never planned for this. I never imagined I'd be here, on one knee, asking someone to share the rest of my life with me." Chloe felt tears burn in her eyes. "But then you came along," James continued, smiling, "and turned my world upside down. You made me feel things I never thought I could. You made me want something I never knew I needed." She covered her mouth with her hands, unable to hold back her emotions. "I love you, Chloe, and I want to spend every single day of my life with you. I want to laugh with you, fight over silly things, travel the world, and come home knowing you'll be there." He held her hand firmly, looking into her eyes. "So, will you marry me?" Chloe let out a breathless laugh, tears spilling freely down her face. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." The restaurant erupted in applause as James slid the ring onto her finger. Then he stood up, pulling her into a deep, passionate kiss filled with promises. And in that moment, Chloe knew there was no fear in the world strong enough to keep them apart. They belonged to each other forever. The day was perfect. The sky was blue, the breeze was gentle, and the sun shone softly, warming the morning. Chloe could hardly believe this day had finally come. She wore a stunning white gown with delicate lace that hugged her figure and a long veil that flowed gracefully to the floor. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, and her hands trembled slightly as she held a bouquet of white flowers. Inside the hall, the guests were gathered, waiting for the most anticipated moment. But to Chloe, only one person in that crowd truly mattered, and he was right there, waiting for her. James stood at the altar, dressed in a flawless suit, but that wasn't what caught her attention. It was the way he looked at her, as if she was the most precious thing he had ever seen. Chloe bit her lip, holding back tears, and began walking down the aisle. With each step, her heart pounded faster. And then, when she finally stood beside him, James took her hand and whispered softly, "You look beautiful." She smiled. And then the officiant began the ceremony. Every word spoken felt more meaningful than anything else in the world. But the moment Chloe had waited her whole life for came when the officiant asked, "James Fisher, do you take Chloe Carter to be your wife, promising to love her, honor her, and stand by her side for all the days of your life?" James held her hand tighter. His eyes shone with emotion, and his voice was steady, but filled with feeling as he answered, "With all my heart, yes." Chloe felt a lump in her throat, and when the officiant turned to her, she thought her chest might burst with happiness. "Chloe Carter, do you take James Fisher to be your husband, promising to love him, honor him, and stand by his side for all the days of your life?" She took a deep breath, looking at the man who had changed her life in every possible way. And then she smiled with everything she had. "Yes, yes, forever, yes." James let out a quiet laugh, his eyes filled with love. "Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Before the officiant could even finish the sentence, James pulled Chloe close, wrapping his arms around her waist and kissing her deeply, sending the guests into cheers and applause. She laughed against his lips, feeling happier than she ever thought possible. What did you think of James and Chloe?